Our special guest today, a hockey lifer, a former player agent. He was executive vice president of the NHL. He's been a president, vice president, general manager, 6 NHL teams. Brian Burke, Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show, coming up. Today's special guest was born in Providence, Rhode Island. He played college hockey at Providence. He graduated from Harvard Law School. He's a former player agent, former analyst for CBC, Sportsnet, executive vice president and director of operations for the NHL, general manager of the 2010 U.S. Olympic team, the general manager of the Hartford Whalers, general manager of the Vancouver Canucks, general manager of the Anaheim Ducks, won a Stanley Cup in 2007. Former president and GM of the Maple Leafs, president of hockey operations and GM for the Calgary Flames, and he is currently president of hockey operations for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Welcome to the program, Brian Burke. Great to have you here, my friend.
Thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
Well, you know, not long ago, you released a book along with Stephen Brunt called Burke's Law, A Life in Hockey by Brian Burke and Stephen. Just finished reading it. Yesterday, as a matter of fact. Absolutely loved it. Very enlightening. Envy you in a lot of ways, Brian. Your candor, your ability to be who you are. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Tell me about first of all, you grew up a fourth child in a family of 10 kids. Tell me about the benefits and the drawbacks of growing up in that size of a family.
Yeah, 10 kids and, like one set of twins. All the rest of the kids, my sister's passed on, but growing up with 10 kids is wonderful. There's always someone to read a book with or play a board game with or start a fight with my two older brothers. And so I loved it. It was a great family situation for us. My mom and dad were strict Catholics, and it was funny because we went to a high school or a grammar school in Chicago, a suburb of Chicago called Oak Park. And in my class, so at the Catholic school I went to, which was St. Giles, in my class there were 3 sections of kids, 30 kids each, so like 100 kids in grades 2, say. And in that group of my 30 kids in my class, there were 3 kids that were members of classes of 10 or more. So big families were quite common back then, obviously, and quite common in the Irish kids in the Chicago area.
You know, your grandmother had a line, and read this in the book, like, her line was, you should never start a fight, but you should finish every one of them. That seemed to serve you well in life, and it seems to be like a motto you've carried on.
Yeah, my mom or my grandma taught us that, Grandma Salmon. So we had or Grandma Burke on my mom and dad's side. On my dad's side, Grandma Burke was a tough lady, and she was like, never start a fight. Never ever start a fight. Do not be a bully. Do not start a fight, but never walk away from one. And that was kind of the way we were raised, which is we didn't start too much, but we finished everything. So that was a good lesson for me.
Now, is that attitude, is that one of the things that drew you to hockey? A game you saw, there's a lot of motion in this game. How did you get your start in hockey?
Well, we moved to Minnesota when my parents moved around a lot. My dad was in sales, and he kept getting promoted and kept moving. So we had my oldest brother and sister were born in Milwaukee, and then we moved to Providence and had 2 more, my brother John and me. Then we moved to outside of Philadelphia and had 3 more, and then moved to Chicago and had 3 more. So we moved around, and we moved to Boston and lived there for 1 year when I was a kid, and then we moved to Minnesota. And we moved to Minnesota there was a big blizzard, and the moving trucks got held up for 3 days somewhere in Ohio or Pennsylvania, and we were stuck at a Holiday Inn or Howard Johnson's it was in Bloomington, Minnesota, and the state high school hockey tournament was on. I had played hockey a couple times on ponds, but like once or twice. I didn't have any gear and hadn't played, didn't know the rules. But so I took it up the next year, and Bob O'Connor was my first coach, and he said, give it a try, and I went out. So I played house Bantam my first year, Bantam house my second year, Pee Wee B midget B my third year, midget A my fourth year, and then high school hockey my fifth year. So I fell in love with the game, obviously.
You have the your Burke's four rules: be the hardest worker on the ice, be a coach's dream, perfect positioning, be a great teammate, play tough and fearless hockey. Obviously, that was that motto, the four rules, served you well, and you ended up playing college hockey despite the fact you were a late bloomer, and you ran into Lou Lamoriello. Tell us about Lou and the influence he had on you and your career and your life.
Well, Lou saw me play the year before I played high school hockey and told Bob O'Connor, my old coach, the late great Bob O'Connor, wonderful man, that I would never play. And then the next year I was playing, and he came back and said, "Yeah, he's improved a lot. He can play." So Lou was a great influence on me. I played 4 years for him. He turned me from a green young man from Minnesota into a polished college graduate with a degree and a contract with the Philadelphia Flyers. So I owe Lou a lot. I learned a lot. It was the best 4 years of my life playing college hockey.
Yeah, and it also turns out that Lou was the one who advised you that maybe the pro career was not the way to go, and he steered you toward Harvard Law School.
Well, when I was a senior at Harvard, I was actually going into my senior year, and my plan was I was an excellent student. I was an honors student in history, and my plan was to get my master's in history and teach and coach. I wanted to coach college hockey and teach. And so I signed up for the GREs, the graduate record exams. That's what you had to take if you were a history major. And I was going to practice one day, and Alana Mooney, the secretary for the league, for the hockey office, said, "Lou needs to see you." So I went in, and Lou had the application for the LSAT, the law school application test. And he said, "You're taking this exam." And I said, "No, I'm not. I don't want to go to law school." And Lou said, "You don't understand. That was not a request. You're taking the exam," with some expletives deleted. I took the exam, was 98th percentile, got into Harvard Law School, and the rest is history.
So the Harvard Law School it's kind of a big deal. I mean, I'm sure you may have watched Suits, with Harvey and Mike and the gang. It's kind of a big deal to be a graduate from Harvard Law School. Did you see yourself? Being in that position earlier in your life, did you think this is where I'm going to be at some point, or this, even an option?
No, Mr. Allen, Keith Allen, was the GM of the Flyers when I signed, and he was the one who mentioned to me at one point. I scouted for the Flyers part-time my first year of law school, and I didn't get paid for it because they didn't have any budget for that, and I didn't know what I was doing. So they said, "You can tag along with Walter Tanis." Walter Tanis was a Flyers scout that showed me how to scout, taught me how to do it, going to games at Boston College and Boston University and Harvard. And but Mr. Allen had mentioned at one point, he said, "Look, you never know. Get your degree, and the Flyers might have something for you down the road." So in the back of my mind, I thought maybe someday I'll work for the Flyers, but that never happened. It's funny how teams come and go in your sequence. When teams offer you a job and they put it in front of you, that card never came up. I always thought, growing up in Minnesota, that I'd work in Minnesota at some point. It didn't happen. I always thought the Flyers might call, and that never happened. So it's been a great run. It's been magical, but a couple teams that I really thought I would work for, no, I never got that shot.
And you gave law a try, but you found that was really not for you. How did you end up as a player agent? Because that was the next stop.
Yeah, well, they were kind of the same, Joe. Like I practiced for 6 years. I'm still licensed to practice law in Massachusetts, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I practiced for 6 years. I did corporate work. I did blue sky work, which is securities work. But then the first couple guys, Mike Busniak, who played with me in the American League, and Frank Bathe, who played with me in the American League, both called me and asked me about representing them. And that's when it really started. So this would have been, I graduated in 81. This would have been, I think, about 83. And so I did my first 2 contracts. Then Pete Peters asked me to represent him. Again, a former teammate, won a Vezina Trophy in the NHL. Was a Calder Cup champion with me in Maine. And so it started guys started calling me. And I never really recruited players or tried to make the agency side of things develop. But players started calling me. So then you get Kevin Dineen, who was a real influential player, really good player, really important guy. And then you get Joel Otto, and you get Brett Hull, and all of a sudden, it's not just that you have a number of players you represent, they're high quality players and high quality people. So that really took off, and I was thinking that might be the best way to go, is to do that full time, leave the practice of law at my office, a big firm doing other things, and just go and focus on representing hockey players and other athletes. I represented Jeff Smith, who won the Boston Marathon twice. I did a couple deals for him. I worked a little bit in other sports, but hockey was my love, and that's what I thought I would do. And that's when, in 1987, that's when Pat Quinn came calling and took me away on the team side.
Right. I mean, you mentioned Brett Hull, and a lot of people don't realize, unless, of course, they read your book. But you played a significant role in him becoming the player that he became. I know he's having trouble with Terry Crisp, and you helped to straighten him out a little bit.
Yeah, Terry Crisp didn't like Brett Hull, and they had a real problem with him as a rookie. And Brett was a really honest guy. Like, I really enjoyed working with him. Still consider him a good friend. And Brett said to me, "This guy's going to kill me." And so I went to practice, and Terry Crisp was just berating him the entire time, calling him a bonus baby and overweight, and said he was going to never play. And instead of asking for a trade, I said to Brett, "You've got to lose some weight and get a haircut, and you got to fit in better with Terry Crisp. Then you got to fit in more here." And I told players this all the time. I still do. You've got to fit in. When a player joins a team, you put a player on your team, you draft him or trade for him. He joins the room. He's got to fit in. It's not my job as the GM to make him fit in or make him like it. It's not his teammates' job. That's part of being a pro athlete, is you've got to fit in. I remember when I moved the first time, when I went to Vancouver, I was an American moving to a Canadian market, Joe. I spent more time, I scoured the newspapers, both papers, there were 2. I could tell you which high school basketball teams in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland were doing well. I could tell you what the political situation was, what different things cost, how much oil cost, how much gold cost. And because I felt it was my job to fit in. As an American moving to Canada, it was my job to fit in. It wasn't Canada's job to accept me. It was my job to fit in. And that's what I told Brett Hull, and Brett did a great job. It was a great end to that story, where he went on to a Hall of Fame career.
Wow, yeah, and that's one of the things that sort of came to me again and again as I was reading the book, is that you told people the truth. I mean, whether they're working for, no matter who it was they were working for, you told them the truth. And if you're working as a player agent and you tell the players the truth, uh, you know, sure. I mean, a lot of agents would just say, storm into the coach's office or the general manager's office and say, "What are you doing with my guy?" or get him on the phone. And when you're told, you gave Brett some helpful pointers, or buddy, you do have play a role in this, and if you tell people the truth all the way through, you're going to probably do pretty well, and that's exactly what happened with you. And I noticed that when you ran into Pat Quinn, tell us about the relationship with Pat, how that came about, that you ended up getting the gig in Vancouver.
Well, Pat was a legend. When I met Pat, I was in training camp with the Flyers. I had signed with the Flyers in 1977, and I had played 7 games for the Springfield Indians that spring after we were eliminated, after Providence College had been eliminated from the playoffs. We lost to Clarkson that year in the playoffs. And Pat Quinn was an assistant coach in the American League the year that I was a player in Maine, in the American League in Portland, Maine. So that's when I first met him, and then he went on, he coached in the NHL and went back to the American League, and we just became friends. And I really worked hard at developing a friendship with Pat Quinn because I admired him so much. And his wife, Sandra, who's, we've lost Pat, obviously, but Sandra's wonderful, and I've still kept in touch with her. The best thing that ever happened to me, I mean, meeting Lou was obviously number one. And you can argue which place those two things come in, but meeting Pat and getting a chance to work with Pat was a tremendous break when I went there in 1987.
Was it when you were in Vancouver? That's when you got your first media gig. What drew you to that side of things?
Well, it was Pat. I mean, I did a show. Dan Russell had a sports talk show, and sports talk radio was brand new. So this is 1987. No one did sports talk back then. This was brand new, and Dan Russell was really good at it. And they asked me to come on the show the first week that I joined the Canucks. So they sent a limo, and I got in the back seat of the limo. I didn't know any better, and he said, "I think you're supposed to sit in the front." And I told the guy, "Drive the goddamn car." And so, I mean, I didn't know any better. And the show went really well, and Dan Russell said afterwards, "We should do a weekly show." So I said, "Well, Pat Quinn's the boss here, not me." So I asked Pat, and Pat seized on this opportunity. He realized we would be the only professional sports team anywhere in North America, baseball, football, basketball, or hockey, that had a senior executive in a speaker's role for a major sports team. So Pat was the one who said, they said, "Would you like to do it every week?" I said to Pat, "It's up to you. What do you want to do?" We talked about rotating guests, having Pat on once a month, or having our coach Bob McCammon, or having an assistant GM. And Pat said, "No, I want you to do it." He said, "But you got to understand something. We're not very good right now. You're going to hate this job. You're going to hate doing this show. There's going to be weeks where you just don't even want to go on because people will be giving us a beating. But I think you should really do it." He had the vision to see that no other team had that voice. So we started doing it. It was a terrific marketing tool for the Vancouver Canucks. It was amazing. It became appointment radio. Like we would do 8,000, 9,000, 5,000, whatever on a Monday night and Tuesday night. And then they'd do like anywhere from 10 to 20,000 on Wednesday night when we did the Canucks weekly updates. So it became a really important staple in Vancouver, and that was all of Pat's vision. He was the guy that saw that.
But you developed the three pillars of running a team. I'm sure Pat had a lot to do with that. Run it like a business, community service, play entertaining hockey. You had a chance to get Gretzky when you were with the Canucks, and it was a deal that you turned down. That turned out to be pretty good for LA, and probably the best thing for hockey. Did you ever have any regrets about that?
Well, it was, so they were selling Wayne Gretzky essentially. They were trading him, but there was a big cash component, and we were made aware of it. I think the initial connection, if I'm not mistaken, was from Arthur Griffiths, I believe. Peter Pocklington was the owner of the Edmonton Oilers at the time. I believe because Arthur was the the son of the owner of the team, Frank Griffiths Sr., and Arthur was involved. And Arthur was and is a great guy. I think he spoke to Peter, and then Pat, talked to Arthur. We just couldn't do the deal, Joe. Like it wasn't like Wayne Gretzky is the greatest player that ever lived. There's no question about that. All the records and all the other stuff he did. He sold tickets. He was a gentleman. He was polite. He was handsome. He was articulate. Like, he's the whole package. This guy, and like you say, he transformed hockey in America and in Canada. The Gretzky trade really changed the face of hockey in North America. It's made the LA Kings a real thing, brought the Ducks into existence, just like slingshotted hockey forward in Canada and in the United States. So, but we couldn't do the deal. So it was Jimmy Carson, and I forget all the other assets. It was Kirk McLean, I think, and Greg Adams, and like 3 or 4 first round picks, and a huge amount of cash, like $25 million US. And So Pat said, we only had we had 6 suites at the rink in Pacific Coliseum. So we couldn't magnify this. There wasn't a way to multiply these earnings or this revenue from whatever we could do. So even if you doubled tickets, we only had 18,000 people, 17,000 people. Even if you doubled, tripled ticket prices, we couldn't recover the money. So Pat said to me, go back and run the numbers. So I ran the numbers. I'm like, even if we raised ticket prices 400%, we could never recover the money. It just didn't make sense for us. So they made the deal with Bruce McNall and the LA Kings, and he went there. And that was tough saying no to Wayne Gretzky, but we couldn't do it. It wasn't a case of we should do it and see if we can make it work. Even Arthur agreed. There's no way we can recover the money.
But there was, as I mentioned, it's a type of deal that worked out very well for the game of hockey, and it's
Yeah.
things have a tendency working out for the best that way sometimes. And so then you went to the NHL for a little while, became head disciplinarian for the league, but you get back into the game as a general manager with the Canucks. Tell me about that transition, going from the executive office and then back into the league, and why you chose to come back.
Well, working for the league was a great experience. So I was one of the first people that Gary Bettman hired, and Gary's a great boss. He taught me a lot. He left me alone when I needed to be left alone. He involved me in every aspect, collective bargaining with officials, with players, international hockey. I don't know how I did that job. When I went back, when I wrote this section of the book, I don't know how I did that job. How I didn't go nuts or go crazy or quit, because the volume of work and the travel on that job during the regular season was brutal. But it was a great job too. It was a fantastic job. Dave Nonis worked with me, and he was terrific. Brian Lewis was in charge of officiating. Mr. Gregory worked with me. So I loved it, but it was all, you never got to win any games. You went to games, you go to a game, so you saw the Rangers play the Flyers in Philly, and all you're praying is that your officials don't make any mistakes and that there's not a review, that something doesn't happen on the ice where a player gets suspended. And so you finish the game, the refereeing was good, there was no reviews, and you're driving back to Philly, but there's no W's or L's, no wins or losses. And for a hockey guy, that's tough. So that's when I decided I would get back on the team side. I had been a GM briefly in Hartford, only for a season, but I knew I could get back in because of the Pronger deal. I had made one deal in my year there that was big enough that I would be able to get back in, and that's what happened with Vancouver.
Right, and you had to you had to be creative when you got to Vancouver. First of all, you made some real slick moves to nab Pavel Bure, who's my son-in-law's favorite player, so he wanted me to talk about that one. So what was your biggest? What was the biggest? The greatest? I suppose the great feeling you have about landing Bure. What was it about that deal that sticks out the most for you?
Well, the whole thing about landing Pavel Bure was drafting Pavel Bure, first of all, because there was a big dispute whether he was eligible or not. So that year, his draft year,
Right.
the NHL took the position that Pavel hadn't played enough games that he had to be drafted in the first 3 rounds, or that he couldn't be drafted because he hadn't played in 10 games. But we had information. Mike Penny was our chief scout, wonderful man. Mike had information that he had played a 10th game, actually an 11th game. He played 11 games, 2 games in St. Petersburg, and we had the game sheets. Mike, I don't know how, Mike had a great network, but Mike had procured these game sheets. And I remember they were in Cyrillic. It wasn't even in English. You had to read Pavel Bure's name and his number in Cyrillic, in the Cyrillic alphabet. And so we felt he was eligible, and I told Pat, I said, look, we're going to take him. And Pat he just never, as brilliant as Pat was, he never got his arms around this player till we got him. He wasn't convinced that Pavel was going to be that good a player. But he said, we took him in the 6th round, and he said, you better not have blown a 6th round pick for nothing. And we didn't find out for a year that Pavel was eligible, that he was in fact a Vancouver Canuck. So remember the draft that year, I want to say it was 89. We had the night before the draft. We had traded. We had Peter Nedved and Pat had traded for Shawn Antosky. There were two of them, brothers, and we got Pavel Bure awarded to us that night. So we went to the draft, which was in Vancouver at GM Place. There was a labor dispute at the Pacific Coliseum, and so they held the draft in Vancouver. I think there were 30,000 people there, as my memory serves me. I think it was the biggest draft ever, but we drafted Peter Nedved at 3 and Shawn Antosky also in the first round. But then the work on Bure became to get him out of his contract with Red Army, which took us a better part of 6 months.
Wow. And then, and that was obviously a 6th-round draft pick for Pavel Bure in retrospect, but that's not too bad. It's like, Nicholas from 7th round. I mean, sometimes you get those gems, or Datsuk. So now the Sedins came along, and no team had ever grabbed 2 picks in the top 5 before, and you had to find a way to do this. I know you were determined to do it, and you did. Like, how were you able to pull that off?
Well, when you talk about the Sedins, you have to, in my view, you have to give credit to 2 people first off. So number one would be, in my view, would be the guy that put this deal together for us in terms of scouting, and that guy was. As I draw a blank looking at the Twins, I'm getting distracted here. I'm watching these.
Yeah.
So number one would be, in my view, now you got me completely blanked here. So let me think who the scout was. That's Rick Dudley. Thomas Gradine. So Thomas Gradine was our chief scout. Sorry, I'm watching the Twins here. I can't do 2 things at once.
Yeah, no worries.
So Thomas Gradine was our Swedish scout, and he came to us early on and said, we got to get these 2 kids together. So this is in the fall of '98, and I said to Thomas, what are you talking about? Like, seriously, think about this. You're telling me I got to pick 2 players at 1 and 2 or 2 and 3? No one's ever done it. What are you talking about? This ain't going to happen. And I didn't even like the players that much. I went and saw them at the World Juniors that year in Winnipeg, and I didn't like them that much. And a lot of people didn't like them that much. But the 2 people I want to mention, because I'll forget, is Mark Crawford was our coach, and he turned them into players. Mark Crawford did a really good job with the Sedins. But they were great kids. They worked hard. We drafted them. Putting the deal together was very difficult. It took the better part of weeks of work. So we had the 3rd pick in the draft. In advance of the draft, we made a deal with Chicago Blackhawks to get the 4th pick in the draft, which is Brian McCabe. And I hated trading Brian McCabe. He was a really important player for us and a great guy. Brian McCabe in the 1st for the Chicago Blackhawks pick, which was 4th overall. So now at this point, going to the draft, which was in Boston that year, we've got 3 and 4. We made a deal on the floor. This all happened in the 10 minutes leading up to the draft. We had talked at length with Rick Dudley was the GM of Tampa. They had the 1st pick, and Atlanta was a new team in the NHL. They had the 2nd pick. We had talked at length with Tampa about getting the 4th pick. So right on the floor, as we walked into the building, Rick Dudley agreed to do the deal. I think we gave up 2/3, and we now had 1 and 3, and they had 4, which was traded by Tampa to the New York Rangers. Ended up being drafted number 4 by Pavel Brendel. And now we got 1 and 3, and then I made a deal with Rick Dudley Donnie Waddell, a wonderful guy. Donnie wanted to pick 1st overall, and that made sense. No one had ever picked 1st overall, and Ted Turner was there. Ted Turner owned the Atlanta Thrashers back then, so Donnie Waddell, he saw the star power there. He said, hell, for a 3rd round pick, sure, let's move up and pick 1st. So it went 1st, and then the Twins together, and that's why they took 22 and 33. They wanted higher numbers than that, but I didn't like high numbers, so I said take 22 and 33. But the final postscript to that one, Joe, is if I was so smart, why didn't I draft him in the right order? Because Henrik Sedin was a better player than Danny, and I drafted him in the mock sequence. Danny went first and Hank went second. Wonderful kids.
Yeah, something tells me that they were okay with that. So I was off to Anaheim, and you told the Samuelis when you got hired in Anaheim there would be two hands on the wheel, steering wheel, and both would be yours. You had that ability to be very upfront with people, right? And you called the 2007 team in Anaheim a team of destiny. Expand on that a little bit.
Well, we had really good. We started with really good players, obviously with Corey Perry and Ryan Getzlaf. They were draft picks with Brian Murray before my time, so I didn't draft them. I wish I could take credit for them, but I did. I can't. And we felt that Bob Murray was my assistant GM, and Randy Carlisle came in as a new coach, and we felt we had a really good team, but we had to rebuild the defense. So there's not one defenseman whose name is on the Stanley Cup in '07 that was there when we got there. Every single one was one that we brought in, either me or Bob Murray. So the biggest prize was Scott Niedermayer. So he was under contract to Rob Niedermayer was under contract with the Anaheim Ducks, and I met with Scott Niedermayer when he became a free agent and said, "What are your goals?" He said, "I want to play in the Western Conference. It's more wide open, and I played for New Jersey for these years. He loved it, won 3 cups, but wanted to open it up. Wanted to play physical hockey and wanted to play with his brother were the 3 things I recall, 2 for sure." And I said, "Well, there's only one guy who can check all his boxes. That's me." So we signed Scott Niedermayer, and then we made the deal with Columbus and brought in Francois Beauchemin, defense. And we just kept adding pieces, and Bob Murray was a big part of that. But all of a sudden, we're playing in the conference final at the end of my first year. We played against the conference finals against Edmonton, lost to them, and they ended up losing the Stanley Cup to Carolina. And we realized how close we were. I had a meeting with our staff. I said, "Did we just ride a hot goalie?" Because J.S. Shigeru was our goalie. I said, "Did we just ride Jiggy to a conference final, or are we legit?" We all agreed we were legit if we could add Chris Pronger. So that's the one piece we added, and we had a parade. We got it done.
You had another piece too. Actually, a guy's going to be on the show in a couple of weeks. Shawn Thornton. Tell me about Shawn's part and all that.
Well, it just shows you I'm not very smart, because Shawn Thornton, we let go to the Boston Bruins after that because he wanted a 3-year contract. And Shawn Thornton had already played 3 or 4 years, including, I think, 2 years in the American League in Norfolk. And we just felt that he didn't have 3 years left. Well, I think he played 6 more years after I had him. So I'm not very smart sometimes. And we let Shawn Thornton go over term, not money. We wanted him back, but we wanted him to take a 2-year deal. Shawn Thornton added a lot to our team. He was tough, leadership skills, really a good guy, very popular teammate. Could play defense, even though he was a right wing. Everyone will always remember Shawn Thornton as a right wing, but he would play point on the power play. I'm not making this up. Shawn will verify it. And he could play defense. I remember the first time I saw him play was at a game in Portland, Maine. He was playing, I think, for Norfolk. He had a fight. He scored a goal. He ran the power play, played defense, and played forward. I remember writing down, this kind of versatility is hard to find. So, yeah, Shawn Thornton was an important part of our team. What a wonderful young man.
So tell us about what was it like to lift that, hoist that Stanley Cup and hold the Stanley Cup?
Well, it's hard to explain unless you worked in hockey. There's nothing like it. It's the pinnacle. I've had bigger days in my personal life. I think the days your kids are born and your kids do this and do that, and you're so proud of them. But professionally, there is nothing like getting a chance to pick up the Stanley Cup. It means you've climbed Mount Everest, whatever cliche you want to use, you've done it. And everyone in hockey is trying to beat your brains out and trying to beat the crap out of your team and make sure you never win a game, let alone a cup, let alone a division. And you're sitting in the last seat at the draft. Like, a lot of people don't realize this. But at the NHL draft, the very back right seat, the last seat, meaning you pick last because you have the highest point total, you're the best team in the league, you're sitting in the back right seat. It's the worst seat in the house. You're the farthest from the rink, you're farthest from the draft boards, but that's the seat you want to be in, and it's a great honor to be in that seat, and we were.
You talk about Toronto being the mecca of hockey. You came to Toronto working for the Maple Leafs. Um, Tell me, is it like a dream job or nightmare job?
Well, it's both. Part of the reason, Joe, part of the reason it's both is we didn't have the development of social media was relatively new when I went there. I went there in the fall of '08, and it was a dream job in that you're the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's like being the GM of the New York Yankees. It's something. It's the Vatican of hockey, and so to me, it was a great job. There's a lot of ghosts in that building, even though the buildings knew they went to the Air Canada Centre, now Scotiabank Arena. But I worked games, many games in Maple Leaf Gardens, and there's a lot of ghosts in that arena, a lot of history, and there's a lot of ghosts in the Toronto Maple Leaf. You look at the players that I got to meet while I worked for Toronto, and the Hall of Famers, and Mr. Keon and Mr. Kelly and guys that went before you. It's just these phenomenal hockey players, and Hall of Famers, and so it's an honor, I think, to work for a franchise like that. We did not get the job done there. I did not have any success with the team, but it's an honor to have worked in Toronto, and it's a great city. So I loved working there. We did not have the success we wanted. The nightmare part of it comes from the media. So you've got a massive media following. So if you look at a dressing room, if you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs dressing room, it's twice the size of a lot of dressing rooms, or half again as big. And you think to yourself, and you can look and see the size of the room, and you think to yourself, well, why is that room so big? Well, they don't have any more players than we have. They've just got 20 players, right? But that's for where the media go after the game. Like when you go into the media room, there's 80 to 100 people in there. And, in Calgary, which is a great hockey market, we might have 30 people covering the team after a game. After a hockey night game, maybe 40. But after a hockey night in Canada game on a Saturday in Toronto, there's 100 people in there. And so the sheer volume of the coverage is daunting. So if you're struggling, 100 people pick up a rock and throw it at you. So you got 6 papers, and they got 4 guys that write for each of the papers. So there's 24. And then the radio guys. And so it can be very difficult to work there. You've got to tune out a lot of the white noise.
You took some heat for the Phil Kessel deal, and you mentioned in the book that you have some regrets about that. What was it about that deal that you regret, and why did you think it was going to work?
Well, the deal was a spectacular failure, and it had nothing to do with Phil. Phil delivered on everything we asked him to do. Phil Kessel was a really important player for us. He's a great kid. I loved having him. He wasn't the reason. The reason was the first round picks that we put in, and they were not lottery protected. And that was, an oversight now, but no one did it back then. Lottery protection was something nobody did. In fact, the Phil Kessel deal and Tyler Seguin, that's why teams started to protect the lottery picks. But the season started, and we made the deal. You'd have to check, Joe. I don't have the stats, but we had a great start. Like going into the Christmas break, we were like 8 games over 500. Like playoffs looked assured, and that's when the great train wreck occurred. And I said it was like an 18-wheeler going over a cliff in slow motion. That's where everything fell off, and we dropped and ended up giving up the second pick overall. So historically, we did not do, we made a terrible deal, but it had nothing to do with Phil. Phil delivered everything that he was supposed to deliver.
What would you say to a player who was coming into the Toronto market, or thinking about coming into the Toronto market? What kind of advice would you give a player?
Well, number one is you have to tune out the white noise. Like I look at players that have come into a big market team, a high profile big market team like a Montreal or a Toronto, number one is you got to tune out the white noise. You just got to play hockey. You got to ignore the criticism. This market in Toronto turns on players over time. You look at Larry Murphy. You look at players they've turned on. They're Dion Phaneuf. And so to me, you've got to ignore the white noise. Just play hockey. That's rule number one. And rule number two is if you get the job done, it's a pretty special place to play when you're winning. You look at when the team's going well, there aren't too many guys who get treated better than the Toronto Maple Leafs when the team's in first place.
We learn a lot from our kids. We have great life experiences as a result of how we grow up, who we grow up with, and then of course the kids we have. Now you had with Patrick. He ran into some issues with mental illness. I mean, he has suffered from mental illness, the disease of mental illness. I can relate. I'm recovered alcoholic, and tell me what you learned as a result of your experience with Patrick and his road.
Well, I think rule number one is that you don't know much about mental illness until you experience it, unless you're a lot smarter than I am. There was not a lot of when you look at the research, Google was new. Like people laugh now, but email was new. I remember when I sent my first email when I worked for the NHL in New York. It was like 19. I don't know when I went there. It was 1993, I guess, or 94. So email was new, and so Google was new, and so you couldn't just go online and research depression and mental illness. It was different now.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know anything about it. I was really uninformed and really uninterested until it affected my son, which is really sad on my part. How stupid I was about it. But these are things you don't encounter until you have to encounter them. If you're well read and intelligent and alert and aware, like I should have been, you know more. But it's like Patrick. So my first wife called and said Patrick's really struggling, and you got to go talk to him. So I went in and talked to him in Notre Dame. He was a senior at Notre Dame, and he told me everything was fine. He just bluffed his way through it, and the next day he couldn't get out of bed. So it's a debilitating disease, depression. It basically is a debilitating, crippling disease that people knew very little about then. Thank God that we know more about it. And Patrick was a big help to me in learning about it and finding the proper support system for him. He's a great kid, and he's been a great supporter in that area of mental health, and of course in LGBTQ issues as well, which I'm sure you'll get to, Joe. But mental health is a big cause now in the NHL, and it's about time. There's parties that I joined very late. I got very late to the party on the LGBTQ stuff because I didn't know enough about it, and I wasn't involved enough about it, and frankly didn't care enough about it back then. Same with mental health. There are things that I've gotten to the party very lately, but I'm passionate about now.
Yeah, when it comes to mental health, addiction, all the aspects of it, the most important thing is to reach out and ask for help. Because if we stay within ourselves, it gets to be a pretty sad story, lonely place, and it can cause us to have more damage. And you mentioned Brendan, and he came out as being gay, and that was tell us about that experience and how that changed you and your outlook.
Well, Brendan came out to me last of there were 4 kids in our family. I had 2 daughters after that. But Brendan came out to me last of the other people in the family. He told his mom, told his 2 sisters, and told Patrick, then told me. And it was basically a non-event in our house. Like I remember we were staying at our townhouse. We had a townhouse in Vancouver. And we were out late, and late for me is 11 o'clock at night. We got home at 11, and I had to go to bed. I go to bed early. And Brendan said, I need to talk to you. I said, we'll talk tomorrow. And Brendan said, no, we need to talk now. So I said, what is it? And he said, well, Dad, I'm gay. And I said, well, are you sure? So, I said, there's a questioning phase people go through. He said, yeah. I said, well, so I hugged him. I said, it doesn't change anything for us. Like in our household, it was a non-event. But I think the notion that a family could accept their gay child, to me, is just automatic. It's like, what are your options? You're not going to accept this child that you love, that's important to you. So to me, it was a non-event. It was a non-event with his two sisters. It was a non-event with his brother Patrick. Non-event with our family. And my mom and dad are both dead now. They were there. I remember they were like, oh, "So what? So who cares?" Like, it was just a non-event in our house, and that's the way I wish it was for every young man or woman that has to come out.
You and I are members of a group that nobody wants to be a member of, and that's the group of people who've lost children. And Brendan, I never got a chance to meet Brendan. I would have loved to have met him. From what I understand, he was an amazing guy. And we lost our son Spencer in 2014, a few years after Brendan left. You mentioned in the book about how you came together as a family and made the decision that you know there was going to be a legacy here, and there was going to be a desired, distinct pattern here. We're going to move forward. We're going to move forward. We're going to use this experience. We're going to be able to help us. In some ways, it's brought us a little bit closer together. In some ways, it's made us tighter. In some ways, it's of course it's been devastating. But tell us about making that decision and how you move on from here.
Well, and I can't, Joe. You know this. There's nothing you can say to someone who loses a child. You're part of a small, sad club for the rest of your life. Unfortunately, it's mostly a small club. Most parents do not survive their children. And so that's a good thing. That's the way it was always designed to be. You bury your own kid, they bury you, and you move on. And when you bury a kid, it's an awful thing. And the more sudden it is, I think the more awful it is in terms of dealing with it, because it's so sudden. One day your son is there, the next day he's gone. And people will say to me, well, it's way worse if your son had a lingering illness. What if he battled cancer? And I know kids who have gone through that too. That has an awful side to it too, but it gives you some finality, gives you a chance to put your affairs in order that you don't have when you pass away suddenly. So this happened in a snowstorm, and Brendan was killed driving in a snowstorm with another wonderful young man from Michigan, Mark Reedy, and they died. Brendan was driving. They were trying to get back for a hockey game. They were going too fast, and they were driving in a blizzard, and they hit a reinforced pickup truck, and Brendan was dead. So it's an awful thing. Again, the suddenness of it is the most difficult thing. I was scouting in a game that night in London, Ontario, watching Nazem Kadri play, and Patrick called me and said, "Dad, Brendan's dead." And I collapsed on the floor. I didn't believe. I said, "No, there's some mistake." So it is, and I'm not crying here, although I frequently do when I talk about Brendan. I get something in my eye. It is a terrible thing. It's a terrible shock to a family. It's a terrible loss. It'll never be the same. You get a piece of your heart torn away. It'll never be the same until I pass on, which hopefully won't be for a while. But you can never recover from it fully. You just need friends and family to recover as best you can when you suffer a loss like that.
Right. I mean, yeah. My wife lost her son. My son and my daughter lost their sibling, and it's devastating for all of us, and we need to come together and move on. And there's other people that have helped me along the way. There's bereaved families has been very, very helpful for me. And of course, a lot of support from my recovery community and just the community in general, family, and it's we'd be able to get through this. As a result, we have a legacy with Brendan, and tell us a little bit about what you felt that Brendan has helped in terms of a legacy.
Well, I think what happens when you have a loss like that, you've got two options as a family. We met. We went to actually after the funeral. We went to an Irish pub of all places, which I love Irish pubs. But it was the only place that was open for lunch, and we sat and said we've got two choices. I remember talking to the other three kids. I said we've got two choices now as a family. Either we move ahead and make Brendan's memory important, and we move ahead as a family, no one moping, no one sitting crying by the side of the road, or we march ahead. And I said, and I'm marching ahead, and so are you. And everyone agreed we're just going to march ahead. And then we said, let's figure out a way to memorialize Brendan's passing and turn it into something positive, which was the You Can Play project, which my kids started. Patrick did most of the work on it, but that's You Can Play is basically our family legacy, and on behalf of the LGBTQ plus community. It's done some great work. Basically, the message is if you can play, if you're good enough to play, doesn't matter what church you go to, doesn't matter who you go home with, doesn't matter what color your skin is, if you can play, if you're good enough to help our team win, you can play. So if you can play, you can play. And it's been a wonderful thing. It's been very therapeutic for me, obviously, to watch this growth and see the NHL support of it and the other teams, other leagues support of it. It's been a great help, I think, to young people that are coming up, dealing with these issues.
Let's do the NHL. And when it comes to diversity, do you feel that there's some great strides made since since Brendan's death? And
Yeah, I think you have to. I think it's really critical that people look at things in terms of the progress that's been made, rather than focus on what we have not accomplished yet, what we haven't accomplished yet. And I think there's an impatience, like certainly for me, on behalf of the LGBTQ community, on behalf of people of color, there's an impatience there. You say, why can't everything be better tomorrow? Why can't we have diversity and inclusion tomorrow? Why can't we? And I look at it very differently. I look at the strides that have been made in the LGBTQ plus community just since Brendan's coming out. The strides have been magnificent. The improvements have been tremendous. And I think it's necessary and critical that we focus on the improvements we've made rather than what we haven't accomplished. I think it's too easy to throw your hands up and say, oh my God, we haven't accomplished enough. Whereas I look at the change just in my lifetime since Brendan came out, in the 10 or 11 years since then, I look at the changes as dramatic and important. I think I focus on the progress. We're nowhere near where we need to be in terms of equality or inclusion or diversity, in terms of people being treated like equals. We're decades away from that, but we're decades away from where we were too. So I focus on the progress we've made. I think it's been significant. I think it's been constant. I think we've got important allies. We're like the NHL has been a great ally in this area. So we'll get there, but you're dealing with a lot of ignorant people. People who have biases against the LGBTQ community. They're idiots. They've built up these biases and these prejudices and these hatreds over decades, over centuries. You're not going to kick down a door that's taken that long to build up. You're going to erode that wall like a mud wall. It's going to erode slowly to change thinking. So we've made a lot of progress. We've got a long way to go. We've got important allies helping us, and we'll get there, but it's going to take some time. And obviously, politically in the United States the last little bit, there's been a setback in terms of people's perception of certain communities. We've got to combat that as well.
yeah, unfortunately, you can't fix stupid. Yeah. And then there's a lot of ignorance, and we need to continue on the road we're on. I just wanted to okay, you've been to the Penguins for this year now, and you've had a chance to be around Sid Crosby. Tell us about the experience with the Penguins and what it's like to be around a player of his caliber.
Well, I've had great players. I've been fortunate enough. I had Trevor Linden was a great player. I had Pavel Bure. I had Mark Messier. I had Chris Pronger. I had Scott Niedermayer. I had Teemu Selanne. I've had lots of great players. I've been blessed in my career. The special thing about Sid is not just that he's this phenomenal hockey player, but he's a class guy, and his work ethic is as good as anyone that's ever put on skates, in my view. I watch this team work. I watch how Sid drives the team. I watch how he improves on his individual parts of his game, like his edge work and puck handling skills. And just, I'm so lucky to have him as a teammate and to work with Sid. He's been amazing. And I haven't even been here a year yet. And I've just marveled at watching him play and watching how hard he works and how hard he drives the group.
And I want to ask you before we go, one quick question on your former club. What are you thinking of the Maple Leafs? There was a little scuffle last night in Winnipeg. Are you seeing a team that's more suited for playoff success now than before?
Well, I didn't mind the scuffle. I never mind the scuffle. Obviously, you know that, Joe. That's kind of what I do. And I don't really care about the Toronto Maple Leafs in terms of where they are, because I work for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So, but I think you can intelligently or semi. I don't want to take any credit for it. I can intelligently attempt to intelligently comment on the team. They're one of the best teams in the NHL right now. They're playing great hockey. They've had great goaltending. They're really tough to beat. They lost last night, but they're on a pretty good run. I'm not going to comment on their chances for playoff success because it's none of my business, frankly. But I will tell you, if you look over the last 15 games or so, I don't know if anyone's won more games. Maybe Florida, maybe Edmonton. I don't know, but they've had a great first half of the season. They're tremendous. They've been playing tremendous hockey.
Yeah, they've only lost 3 of their last 19, so that's a pretty good run. Listen, Brian, I really want to thank you for being with us today, and I want to say once again, if you haven't read the book, read the book. It's called Burke's Law: A Life in Hockey by Brian Burke and Stephen Brunt. An incredible read, very enlightening. I think there's a lot of information here that anybody who wants to be a hockey person is a hockey person. There's a lot of really useful information in that book that can be very helpful. And thank you so much for taking the time to join us, Brian. I know it's early there where you are getting ready for your Penguins to face the Kraken. And if next time you're in Toronto, first time against the Kraken. So better get cracking. Next time you're in Toronto, we got some incredible tie-in clothing for you from Classic Imports. So make sure you let me know when you're around, because we'll hook you up with Jeff. So thanks again for being on the show, and it was great to catch up. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me on.
Lots more.
Hey, I'm Canadian rocker Tommy Gunn, and you got more Joe Tilley sports coming up.
Guests on Joe Tilley Sports receive a gift certificate from Classica Imports. Top of the line imported men's clothing. Check out the Classica Essential Collection now. Go to shopclassica.com.
When I'm working out, I like to wear my Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show t-shirt. It makes me feel handsome and strong. If you want a t-shirt, support the show, click on the link below. Now, back to my workout. 1,761, 1,762, 1,763, 1,764.
Addiction Rehab Toronto, Toronto's #1 alcohol and drug treatment center, saving lives, reuniting families. The only treatment center in the province to offer medical detox, treatment, sober living, and lifetime aftercare all in one place. Our unique and specialized programs are designed to equip our clients with the tools to successfully lead a life of dignity, respect, and purpose. Let us help save your life or your loved one's life. Call today for more information or to facilitate an intervention. 1-855-787-2424 or visit addictionrehabtoronto.ca. Joe Tilley Sports is brought to you by COSA. Central Ontario Standardbred Association, providing a united voice for harness horse people racing at Ontario tracks. Check out your benefits today at COSAOnline.com and check out COSA TV on Facebook and YouTube for all the latest harness news and live action updates. Live racing year-round. Go to HPIBet.com for all your wagering options. Become a member today, and your first bet is free. That's HPIBet.com.
All right, time now for my COSA Swiss picks of the week. Last week I took Mock David in the sixth race at Mohawk. It was the second week in a row that I went with the Oilers superstar namesake. After second place finish last week, well, look at this. Mock David was even better this time around. Travis Cullen driving, trained by Jody Cullen. Mock David was dead last all the way, but at the top of the stretch, watch on the outside, comes from all the way outside, reels them all in, and he gets up at the wire for an $8.50 winner. I also had the exact at 7-8, paid $46, so I made some good money this week, back up almost even on the season. This week, well, I should probably stick with Mock David again, so I will. That 26-second final quarter just can't be ignored, but I'm also going to go with a bit of a shot in the third race at Mohawk. Baywatching, the number 2 horse in the third race. Baywatching finally gets a decent post position, first time Lasix for Baywatching. So let's go $5 win place on the number 2 horse in the third, and $5 win place on the number 4 horse, Mock David, in the fifth. So there you go. For all the racing updates, visit COSA TV on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Go to HPIBet.com for your wagering options. And here we go. Time now for the Rycom Wrap. Sports news that's close to home. You know, before this CFL season started, I had Dwayne Ford on the show, TSN analyst. We both picked, strangely enough, the Hamilton Tiger Cats to win the Grey Cup. Now, I said the Cats would beat Saskatchewan. Dwayne said they'd beat Winnipeg. Way to go, Dwayne. And Hamilton has a shot after knocking out the Argos in Eastern Final at BMO Field. They struggled badly in the first half offensively, but Poppy White started the comeback when he returned a punt for a touchdown in the third quarter. And when Dane Evans came in to replace Jeremiah Masoli, quarterback, in the second half, everything changed. Evans was a perfect 16 for 16 in passing for 249 yards and a touchdown. He also ran for a couple more TDs. As the Cats bounce the Boatmen 27-19, they'll now face Winnipeg in Sunday's Grey Cup showdown at Tim Hortons Field. The Bombers held out the Riders 27-17, so I guess I'll stick with my original pick. I like Dane Evans and the Cats to win it 32-22. Well, that was a great run for the Maple Leafs, as we talked about with Brian Burke. Still just 3 regulation losses in 19 games. A wee setback against the Wild at Mini, but a nice comeback to get the point. And, of course, all the heck broke loose in Winnipeg. That was pretty wild. For the most part, their goaltending has been impressive. The defensive solid up front. They're as potent as any team in the league. No reason to think they can't keep this up come playoff time. The Raptors are finally starting to show some signs of life on the home floor. A couple of impressive wins at Scotiabank Arena. First, they knocked off the defending NBA champion Bucks. Then they took care of business against the 14-9 Wizards. They needed those 2 wins just to get their home record at 4-8 now. The defense is getting better. Pascal Siakam popped in 20 against Milwaukee, 31 against the Wiz. If this guy stays hot, hey, that'll help. This could be trouble. Well, the National Lacrosse League season is finally underway. The Rock played their first game in 363 days. Yes, first home date at First Ontario Centre with the Albany Firewolves in town. Tom Schreiber caps off a lovely power play. His 4th goal of the night. The Rock led by a pair. The Wolves would rally to take the lead late, but then Dan Dawson goes to work. Dawson tied it up. Then with 2.5 left, he converts the feed from Latrell Harris. Dangerous Dan moves past Colin Doyle into 4th spot all-time in NLL scoring as the Rock top Albany 10-9. They're in Halifax this week, home to Philadelphia on December 18th. Pro boxing returned to Southern Ontario this week. United Promotions put on a fine 6-bout card at the CAA Centre in Brampton.
Fight night here in Brampton. In the house tonight, undisputed. Former heavyweight champion Lennox Lewis. Lennox was part of a packed house at the CAA Center in Brampton. First pro fight card in Ontario in almost 2 years. Brampton's Josh Fraser was particularly impressive in his pro debut. The former amateur champ dropped Pablo Acosta of Argentina 3 times before the referee halted the bout 2.5 minutes into the second round. You know, you're kind of a big deal when Russ Amber is your cut man. Josh Wagner kept his unblemished record intact. The 29-year-old from Orangeville pounded out a unanimous 8-round decision over Uriel Hernandez of Mexico. A battle of super welterweights. Paralocals squared off in the semi-main event. Cody Kelly of Collingwood against Barry's Mark Smither. Smither showed off a combination of speed and power. He dropped his opponent twice on his way to a unanimous decision. Saduk Singh Badi, who calls Ajax home, was forced to go the distance by tough Mexican veteran Juan Carlos Regosa. Badi landed some solid shots on his way to a lopsided decision. He improves to 9-0. Great show. Boxing is back. By the way, I'm sure you're wondering about my pick for the Tank Davis-Isaac Cruz fight.
Well, buckle up, folks. We're about to witness a power surge at the Staples Center Sunday. Gervonta Tank Davis, the prize protege of Floyd Money Mayweather, puts his WBA lightweight belt on the line against Isaac Pitbull Cruz. Cruz is 22-1-1. He can take a pretty good shot. Have you seen the workouts he's been doing? Standing upside down on his head, working on that neck and chin. Well, that chin is about to get tested. Tank hits like a tank. Nobody in that division can match his power. 25-0, 24 knockouts. That left uppercut has put more people to sleep than Tylenol. He also has that corkscrew left, a combination hook uppercut that is also devastating. Thing is, he can punch with either hand. He knocked out Pedroza with a right that landed right on the button. If he attacks the body, well, that's not going to go too well for Mr. Cruz either. The Pitbull will come to fight. Could be interesting for a while, but Tank will land one of those bombs, and it will end suddenly, efficiently, and convincingly. I'm thinking about round 6. By the way, a final word on Teofimo Lopez spouting off after the George Kambosos fight. Buddy, you're a good banger, solid fighter. You'll probably win another title. But dude, you lost the fight. You got dropped, and Kambosos boxed your ears off. Get over it. Capiche?
I ain't no sore loser. I take my wins like I take my losses. At the end of the day, man, I'm a true champion. I came out here, I did what I had to do, and I went out there and I did my best. Yo, I don't care what anybody says, man. I am as real as they come. And watch, this is the takeover, man. We don't stop. We keep coming. Yo, at the end of the day, man, I love you all. I won this fight.
No. No, you did not win the fight. By the way, Gervonta Davis did win the fight, but unanimous decision, hurt his left hand in the fight. And I'll tell you what, Cruz put on a much better show than I expected him to. Well, anyway, that's it for this week's show. We want to close with a look at the folks who make this all possible. These are friends, trusted business associates, and all-around great folks. We highly recommend them all. A reminder that the show is available on Spotify, iTunes, Breaker, Radio Public, Google Podcast, and Pocket Cast, as well as the Spanglish Network, Zingo TV, and like and subscribe to the show on YouTube. Thanks once again to Brian Burke for being on the show. It's great to have Brian on, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next week when Ted Nolan drops by. We'll see you then. Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show is brought to you by
Brian Gribben Insurance Planning, helping you solidify your financial future.
At BGIP, what we do that's unique in the marketplace is we show people how to spend and enjoy their money in their early years of retirement without the fear of running out. Also, we're able to do this without you having to change financial advisors. Please look us up at bgip.ca today, and let's book a 30-minute phone call to see how we can bring value to you and your family in your planning.
Call Brian today for all your retirement needs. We did. 905-686-5678. Brought to you by MNP, a leading Canadian national accounting, tax, and business consulting firm. MNP proudly serves and responds to the needs of our clients in the private, public, and non-for-profit sectors. Through partner-led engagements, MNP provides a collaborative, cost-effective approach to doing business and personalized strategies to help people and organizations succeed across the country and around the world. With local offices in Oshawa, Toronto, Mississauga, Burlington, and more, our team is here to support you. Visit mnp.ca to learn more. Hi, I'm Joe Tilley, and I want to tell you about the painting pros. Patrick and his crew recently came into my home, and they painted the walls, they added some color. It's fantastic, and I can't be more satisfied with the work they did. That crew is tremendous. They were professional, they were courteous, they were respectful, and they did a fantastic job. Look at that. Look at that color. I just can't stress enough how satisfied we truly are with Patrick and his crew. For all your painting needs, go with the pros. You know, if I'm going to a public place or visiting a friend, I like to be safe and styling. That's why I put on my Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show mask.
Come on in.
If you want to support the show, pick up a mask, click on the link below.